If you have moved through the course at a consecutive pace, I believe you are now ready to learn some valuable tools about the inevitable. In this module, I will teach you about the costs associated with death. As much as this information disturbs me, I do think it's important to relay. As a college graduate with two accounting degrees, I am going to teach you about the concepts that can maybe occur after losing a loved one and ways you can look out for yourself now and in the future. In general, death and dying is a major life event. Therefore, it has become expensive. From end of life healthcare to legal expenses to memorial costs to the death tax, you could potentially find yourself in a tight position with money after a loved one passes away, which is why it can be helpful in educating yourself about these particular expenses before you experience another death in your family. You might be experiencing these expenses right now. What I want to do in this module is to teach you techniques to better prepare for future deaths. Basically, I want to teach you to live more in alignment with the inevitable part of life, which is death. A lot of the time, when a relative dies, people automatically think of inheritance and they might see dollar signs. But the reality of this is that sometimes all of the inheritance does come with a major cost. That is why it is crucial to have conversations with your loved ones right now while they're living about the family's will. Questions to ask loved ones that are still living that might be closer to death than you are the following. Do you have a company that I will inherit? Do you have a trust that I will inherit? Do you have a piece of land that I will inherit? Do you have an estate that I will inherit? Every state in the United States of America has different tax laws associated with death that might impose an estate or an inheritance tax. To start, it might be a good idea to learn about your particular state. You can find out the cost of dying through the source Yahoo Finance, which will be left in the notes of this particular module. The death tax is not for the person who died. It is for the people that are left behind that loved that person. And to be honest, it makes not a lot of sense, but this is the way the laws are set up in the United States of America. Now, in other countries, I'm not so sure, but it's your best interest to get educated on this topic. Now that we've talked about inheritance and wills a little bit, death tax as well, legal expenses are the next piece to this puzzle. In this particular part of this module, I want to go over what a will is and how much it costs. So, a will or a testament is a legal document that expresses a person's wishes as to how their property is to be distributed after their death, and as to which person is to manage the property until its final distribution. Setting up a will is one of the most important parts of planning your death. A will can cost 150 USD or less. On LegalZoom, a will goes for about 85 United States dollars. There are also do-it-yourself kits to create and file a legal enforceable will as little as $10. If your will is more complicated, then you might need to hire a lawyer, which will cost anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 USD. Now, as you can see, just planning for someone's death does cost money. So that's why it's so important to be informed about these expenses. That way you can start budgeting now. Once the person does actually cross and transition to the other side, you do need to factor in the cost of a memorial. Now, when your loved one was creating a will, were they wishing to be buried, cremated, or donated to science? On average, a funeral today in the United States with a wake and burial service has an average cost of $6,500. And that is without taking into account a cost of a casket, which is on average of $2,000. Cremation comes at a third of the cost of a burial. On the high end, it can cost anywhere from $3,000. On the low end, it can cost anywhere from $1,500. Donation compared to burial and cremation has no cost. Typically, your estate or family never incurs costs for the donation process. Lastly, you might also want to take into account end of life healthcare services like in home care, hospice care, out of home care, or hospital care. Obviously, you cannot predict what type of care you will need at the time of death or if you will need any care whatsoever. But it doesn't hurt to familiarize yourself with the costs associated with this type of care. So let's go over the following. Let's begin with in home care. In home care is billed at an hourly rate. Right now, the rate is anywhere from $16 to $28 per hour. Out of home care or facility based care is billed daily, ranging from $115 to $250 a day. With a terminal illness or something like Alzheimer's, a person could receive hospice care, which for the most part can be covered by Medicare or Medicaid. There are studies out there that suggest someone who died in hospice care incurred about $18,000 per month in end of life expenses. Hospital care is by far the most expensive place to live your final days. In fact, a study has found that someone who has died in a hospital incurred over $30,000 in medical bills if they stayed for the duration of 1 month. So that is about $1,000 per day. Unfortunately, these are not my favorite topics to talk about. When I start thinking about the cost of death, it really does overwhelm me. But that is the reason why I decided to make a module surrounded on the expenses around death. Death is expensive and it's already overwhelming enough that I think it's really important to talk about these expenses so you can better educate yourself. Basically, what we're doing is we're normalizing the discussion about death so we can facilitate death planning. Death planning will help you in those times where you just don't want to deal with the minutia of a death, like remembering what passwords were in this account or who wrote the will or who gets this piece of land. All of that hopefully can be planned beforehand. And when you are actually grieving your loved one, you won't have to deal with all the details.